"Sir, you need to see this." The voice on the other end of the secure line was shaking. It was October 2015, and the director of the CIA had just been informed that someone had gained access to his private email, not a foreign state actor, not a terrorist group, but a 15-year-old boy sitting in a dimly lit bedroom thousands of miles away. It wasn't just an intrusion. It was a declaration, "We already own you." The room was silent except for the faint buzz of an old ceiling fan and the rhythmic clicking of a keyboard. It wasn't much, just a second-hand desk, a worn-out chair, and a laptop held together with tape and defiance, but it was enough. On the edge of Leicester, England, while most 15-year-olds were glued to video games or social media, one teenager was quietly slipping into the heart of America's intelligence empire. He wasn't a genius coder. He wasn't trained in elite computing or mathematics. What he had was something far more dangerous: obsession, audacity, and the terrifying power of intuition. His username was Crackas, but no one in his quiet neighborhood knew what he was doing, who he was becoming, behind that locked bedroom door. He started with curiosity. A hunger to understand systems, not just the software but the people behind them. Crackas wasn't trying to destroy anything. Not yet. He wanted to see how far he could go. Could someone like him, just a kid with no resources, no backing, and no army, outwit the most guarded institutions in the world? Turns out the answer was yes. He didn't need firewalls to fall or encrypted servers to be cracked. All he needed was a phone. He'd spend hours studying the behavior of call center employees, how they spoke, what words they used, what security questions they asked, and how quickly they gave up under pressure. And then one day he made his first real call. It started simple: a tech support line for a major American telecommunications company. He faked an American accent, claimed to be a worker, mentioned internal lingo he picked up from leaked documents online. The person on the other end barely questioned him. By the end of the call, he had administrative access to a customer account. That customer? A high-level intelligence operative. That success lit a spark that would grow into an inferno. If this worked, what else could he do? Could he reach higher? He had no team yet, just himself and his screen. And then one name floated to the top of his list. John Brennan, the director of the CIA. The idea was ridiculous. Absurd. This man had access to national secrets, military strategy, intelligence briefings, and private conversations with the president. But Crackas had a different view. No one was untouchable. Everyone left a digital footprint. And with the right words, even a spy boss could be tricked. He began with the basics, researching Brennan's background, combing through social media, leaked data dumps, old interviews, even government filings. He learned names of Brennan's friends, family members, favorite authors, pet names. Details that seemed mundane to anyone else were, to Crackas, the keys to a vault. Then came the second call. This time, Crackas impersonated a Verizon employee. He used information gathered from online databases to request access to Brennan's broadband account. The agent on the other end of the line never knew what was happening. Minutes later, Crackas had control of Brennan's email account. And there it was, right in front of him. The inbox of the director of the CIA. He froze. This wasn't a simulation. This wasn't a practice run. He was inside. Inside the digital world of a man who knew where covert operations were unfolding. Who had written to other high-ranking officials about drone strikes, interrogations, black sites. And it was all sitting in an AOL inbox. Unsecured. Vulnerable. Crackas didn't just read the emails, he studied them. Every attachment, every contact, every number. He downloaded what he could, screenshotted the rest. There were files marked confidential, documents referencing military strategies in Afghanistan, personal notes on national security threats, and even Brennan's top-secret clearance application, an in-depth profile of the man's entire career and psyche. Still, it wasn't enough. He wanted people to know. He wanted the world to see just how exposed their leaders were. So he leaked what he found, first to underground forums, then to journalists. Screenshots of Brennan's inbox made headlines. The CIA was humiliated. Panic rippled through Washington. But Crackas wasn't finished. Brennan was only the beginning. Over the coming weeks, Crackas and the small crew he eventually brought together, who would later be known as Crackas with Attitude, repeated the process with terrifying efficiency. One by one, they hacked their way into the digital lives of some of the most powerful people in America. They impersonated Homeland Security officials, fooled FBI help desks, even left voicemail messages for senior intelligence figures, mocking them, daring them to retaliate. But it all started with a boy in a bedroom. A kid with a laptop and a goal, to prove that the gatekeepers of the world weren't as secure as they claimed. And he did it not with brute force, not with armies or guns. but with patience, charm, and a voice on the other end of a call that sounded just convincing enough. By the time the CIA realized what had happened, it was too late. They had already been owned. The first breach was shocking. The second was humiliating. But what followed, that was something else entirely. It became a quiet storm, an invisible war waged by teenagers who moved through systems like shadows, exploiting every crack they could find. The headlines had barely cooled from the Brennan leak when more names began to appear. James Clapper, Director of National Intelligence. Mark Giuliano, Deputy Director of the FBI. Jed Johnson, Secretary of Homeland Security. These were not minor targets. These were the architects of the U.S. security infrastructure. And one by one, their private lives were turned inside out and spilled across the internet for all to see. It wasn't just email accounts anymore. The group went further. They accessed voicemails, call logs, personal photos, employee directories, and even tapped into internal portals used by federal agencies. The attackers didn't need sophisticated malware or government-level backdoors. All they needed was confidence, timing, and the art of pretending to be someone they were not. They would pose as IT staff or family members or even the officials themselves. A convincing American accent, a made-up badge number, and a tone of authority could trick almost any customer service agent. "Hi, this is Director Clapper. I'm locked out of my account. I need to reset my credentials immediately." It didn't matter that the voice on the other end was a teenager half a world away. The damage was already done. Their preferred method was almost elegant in its simplicity: social engineering. No brute force attacks. No virus-laden attachments. Just manipulation, human error, and a fundamental flaw in the one system that can't be patched: trust. What they found behind those logins was even more explosive than they'd imagined. Internal FBI documents, confidential intelligence reports, private emails filled with sensitive discussions, not to mention the personal data of thousands of government employees. Names, phone numbers, social security numbers, addresses. It was all just there. Unprotected. Unguarded. Waiting. They didn't just download and disappear. They wanted people to know. They wanted humiliation, exposure, retaliation. So they made a spectacle of it. Some of the officials began receiving harassing calls at all hours of the night. Others discovered their home addresses posted online. For James Clapper, the line between personal and professional blurred in real time when his home phone rang and a voice said, "We're watching you." At one point, the group managed to hack into a law enforcement database and publish a list of over 20,000 FBI agents and staff, including their locations, phone numbers, and email addresses. Then came DHS. Then DOJ. It was an avalanche, and no one at the top seemed able to stop it. The public was stunned. This wasn't the work of foreign spies or rogue insiders. These were kids. Teenagers with no physical access, no weapons, no infrastructure. And yet they had breached the digital walls of the U.S. government like it was a game of connect the dots. Worse yet, they made it theatrical. Screenshots of their exploits were shared on social media with mocking captions. One message read, "This is what happens when you mess with innocent people." Another, sent directly to a reporter, said, "We did this because they need to know they're not untouchable." The question that haunted everyone watching wasn't how they did it. That was already clear. The real question was why. Was it political? A protest? Revenge? Or just a desire to prove that power could be dismantled from a bedroom in Britain? The truth was probably a mix of all three. Crackas and his crew framed themselves as hacktivists, digital rebels exposing a system built on surveillance, lies, and control. They were angry about drone strikes, about police brutality, about Palestine, about the way governments wielded power without accountability. In their minds, this wasn't just hacking. It was war. Information war. And they were winning. Inside Washington, the panic was immediate and contagious. Emergency meetings were held. Internal security audits launched. Passwords were changed. Systems taken offline. But the damage had already been done. There was no way to undo the fact that the CIA, the FBI, and Homeland Security had all been outwitted by teenagers armed with nothing but determination and a phone plan. And still, the intrusions continued. No matter how many warnings were sent, no matter how many firewalls were reinforced, the group found new ways in. They had turned the intelligence community into a house of mirrors, where nothing could be trusted and every reflection might be a lie. Behind the chaos, Crackas remained largely hidden. He wasn't posting selfies. He wasn't bragging to friends. He was focused. Every move was calculated. Every breach meant to deepen the wound. He wasn't trying to make headlines anymore. He was trying to leave a scar. The worst part? No one knew when it would end. Was this the peak or just the beginning? Each day brought new fear. Who would be next? What would be leaked? Could a group of teenagers really dismantle the credibility of the world's most powerful intelligence networks? The answer increasingly seemed to be yes. And the longer it went on, the more terrifying the silence became. Because behind every leaked email, every stolen voicemail, and every exposed identity was a ghost with a keyboard. And no one knew who was next. 4 months, they danced through the shadows, pulling the strings of a digital puppet show that no one could shut down. But in the world of intelligence, even shadows eventually leave a trail. The walls were closing in, not just for Crackas but for every member of the group that had taken a wrecking ball to America's cybersecurity ego. They had mocked the most powerful agencies on Earth. And now the hunt had begun. The first real clue didn't come from a high-tech surveillance program or an elite forensic team. It came from a mistake. A small one. A browser cookie, a misconfigured VPN, a timestamp that didn't match. Crackas had been careful, obsessively so, but the longer they played the game, the more chances they took. And the more they taunted their targets, the harder those targets pushed back. The CIA, FBI, and GCHQ began working together, piecing together the digital breadcrumbs left behind by the group. Intelligence teams analyzed voice recordings from prank calls, tracked routing patterns of spoofed numbers, and scrutinized metadata embedded in files and screenshots shared online. Every insult the group posted, every leak they celebrated left fingerprints. Still, Crackas believed he was untouchable. They all did. After all, how could a teenager be seen as a real threat? They had slipped past layers of national defense without breaking a sweat. But behind the scenes, investigators were zeroing in on something far more important than IP addresses or server logs. They were tracking behavior. Crackas' language, his phrasing, the cadence of his speech when he spoke on calls pretending to be an agent, all of it was analyzed. Then came the turning point. One of the group's private chat servers was compromised. A quiet move. No announcement. No arrest. Just surveillance. For weeks, agents watched conversations unfold in real time, studied them, cataloged aliases, built psychological profiles. And eventually, a name surfaced. A real one. Kane. The arrest was swift. Early morning. No noise, no media. Just officers outside a modest home in Leicester, knocking on the door of a boy who, hours earlier, had been laughing at voicemail messages left for U.S. intelligence officials. When the story broke, it sent a chill across the digital world. The kid who had brought American agencies to their knees wasn't part of a terrorist network. He wasn't Russian, Chinese, or North Korean. He was a teenager with a stammer and a school uniform. A kid who lived with his parents, who used a laptop older than most smartphones, and who had once said he just wanted to make a difference. In court, the mood was electric. The prosecution didn't need to exaggerate. The facts were shocking enough. Gamble had accessed the private accounts of the CIA director, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Deputy Director of the FBI. He'd obtained classified files, leaked sensitive data, and impersonated federal officials on live calls. But what truly unsettled everyone wasn't just what he accessed, it was how easily he did it. The judge called it a form of cyber terrorism. He spoke of the political motivations behind the hacks, the national embarrassment caused, and the unprecedented nature of the breach. It was clear the damage wasn't just technical, it was psychological. The very idea that an enemy could be so young, so ordinary, and so successful had rattled the intelligence community to its core. Gamble was sentenced to 2 years in a youth detention facility. Some said it was too lenient. Others argued he was still just a child, driven more by ideology than malice. But no one left the courtroom thinking the story was over. Because even after the arrest, the fear lingered. If Kane could do this, who else could? The breach had exposed more than emails. It exposed a truth that couldn't be unlearned. The systems guarding national secrets weren't built to withstand charm, manipulation, or relentless curiosity. They were designed for enemies who used bombs, not phone calls. But the new threat didn't knock down doors or plant bugs in offices. It logged in, smiled, and said all the right things. In the months that followed, cybersecurity policies were rewritten. Call centers retrained staff. Two-factor authentication became mandatory across departments. But the damage to trust was irreversible. Every staffer who clicked forgot password, remembered the name Kane. Every agent who gave information over the phone wondered if they were being recorded. The paranoia was permanent. And somewhere, in some dark corner of the internet, others watched. Listen, learn. Crackas with attitude may have disbanded, and their leader may have been unmasked. But the blueprint remained. The message had been sent loud and clear. The next great threat to national security might not come from a bunker or a battlefield. It might come from a teenager in a bedroom with a cracked screen, a cheap headset, and a cause. And no one would see it coming. Ask ChatGPT.